Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, or the first in our webinar series on how to teach spelling effectively. So today I'm going to go through the first part, which is all about spelling skills. Just while we're waiting for everybody to get joined in, I'll just go over a few little notices from EdShed, and then we'll get started in a minute once everybody's in. So, Spelling Shed is an award-winning spelling product, and if you do not already use Spelling Shed, you can get a free 30-day trial. You don't need to put any card details in when you use our trials. It will just end at the end of the trial. So if you are interested, you can sign up at edshed.com, or you can email support@edshed.com if you are wanting any more help or information. Our social media channels are all listed on the screen now. We've got really active social media, especially our YouTube channel. We've just had a game developer do a live of one of our new games, so that will be a really interesting watch on there. We do offer in-school training, so our trainers come into your school and we offer bespoke training packages, full-day sessions, half-day sessions or twilight sessions. So if you're interested in any of those, you can email us or find out more on our training page. And the other training that is coming up at the moment is our Spelling Unpacked training, which is events around the country. We visit lots of different areas and you can go and learn all about spelling. So that one's not specifically about Spelling Shed. We also have Leading the Way to Effective Spelling for your spelling leaders in your school. Our last chance to do that part 1 is on the 12th of November. So if you are interested in that, make sure you sign up soon. You can also find out more about those on that website too. So let's get started then. Now we've got everybody here. So how to teach spelling effectively. We're going to do a 4-part series here. So part 1 will be all about the spelling skills. So that's today. And we've got part 2 next week, which will be Phonics for all. Part 3 is the Orthographic Knowledge, and part 4 is the Morphology and Etymology. So it's every Wednesday in November. If you're looking at those and thinking, whoa, there's some new terminology there for you, don't worry. By the end of the series, you will have a comfortable understanding of all of these terms and how it impacts our learning and spelling. So part 1, spelling skills. So communication is really, really important, and there's multiple ways of communicating. You've got spoken,
as in sunshine.
You've got multiple languages, you've got pictures, actions, symbols, lots of different things, and they don't all directly translate all the time. So all of these things on the screen here, sunny, valley, balm, and the picture can all describe that bottom left picture, but I'm using a different word for each of them. I am communicating them in different ways. And sometimes what happens is we think that you can have a direct translation between all of these communications, and it doesn't really work like that. You see it most of the time when you're trying to translate with other languages. For example, there's a German word, Fernweh, which means a longing for far off places. It's like the opposite of homesickness, but there isn't actually an English equivalent to that individual word there. So you find sometimes that you've got translations that don't quite work. And it does happen a little bit with spoken and written language too. It's most notable in grammar. So you often say a sentence out loud, but if you wrote that exact sentence down the way you said it, it might be considered inaccurate if you did it word for word. And you've got certain spoken words that you don't really fit into writing, like interjections and things like that. And another place to look at that disconnect between the spoken and the written is with abbreviations. So if you say Mr. or Mrs., but think about how you'd see them written down, it would look very different. So I haven't got that sound correspondence to each of them. I would always say the word in full, but when I write it down, I very rarely write it out in full. I often write it out in the abbreviated form instead. And our spelling system has got quite complicated because there have been so many different influences on our spelling system. We've got languages that have influenced it. So we've got the Anglo-Saxon base, but there's Latin influence and Greek influence in there. There's French and all sorts. We're getting new words all the time from all sorts of different places. Interestingly, our handwriting at one stage even influenced our spelling system. So here is what the old writing system looked like, and you can see a lot of the letters look very, very similar. So that can often explain why you've got an O in some words where you'd expect an U instead, like in love and come. It's because of that when we're writing it down, it had to make it clear, so they changed it to an O rather than having the U. There's also the Great Vowel Shift and the printing press are also some big influences on our spelling system. So a lot of interesting history around the spelling system to look into. And unfortunately, it's still changing. So our language, every year, approximately 1,000 words are added to the Oxford English Dictionary. And new words can be formed from another language. So one last year, according to this webpage that's on the link there, was blah, from Irish, which is another word for bread. So if we didn't already have enough with bat or roll or bun, we've got blah now. And I'm hoping that's the pronunciation, but with it being Irish, it probably isn't that pronunciation. Clipping and blending words. So I was thinking about webinar when I was writing these webinars. It is web plus seminar blended together. So that's a clipping and blending example of where we've added new words into things. You can get it from combining existing words in compound words. So one added to the dictionary last year was speed run, an attempt to complete a video game in one great big speed run, combining two existing words into a new compound word with a new definition. And also reusing obsolete words. So the word wireless used to mean something different. And if you ask an older generation about what a wireless is, they're talking more about radios generally, rather than just without wires, which is what we would mean today. Now, there is a common perception that spelling is all about your visual memory. So taking a mental picture of the word, and that is the basis of the spelling skill. But actually, that's not really the case. This study from Yoshi et al. Found the source of this was from 1926 in a study that found deaf children could spell as well as hearing children. But more recent studies have disproved this theory. If children relied on visual memory for spelling regular words like stamp, sting, strike, and irregular words like sword or said or enough that have a similar length and frequency, then you'd expect them to be misspelled equally as often, but they're not. There's lots of things that go into our spelling skill. It's not just all about that visual memorization. And the next key player that shows up often in our spelling instruction is phonics. Phonological knowledge, or knowledge about the sounds in our language, is an important foundation for spelling. So here this quote goes on to talk about, in order to spell, we need to be phonologically aware. Here, identify and manipulate syllables, rhymes, individual sounds, individual phonemes in spoken words, and using that phonological knowledge to segment each word into smaller units, and then matching them to appropriate letter or letter combinations. And there is a lot of debate around phonics, and the reading wars have been raging for numerous years. And it's more recently got settled on phonics approaches, although there is still debate out there. But nobody that I have seen completely invalidates phonics. Phonics is a key element, but I've underlined the part here where it says an important foundation, especially for spelling, because phonics is not enough on its own. You can't write effectively with just phonics, just as you can't read effectively with just phonics. You've got comprehension to consider and composition. But even within word reading or transcription, you have words with alternate pronunciations or sounds with multiple different ways of representing them. So we need something a little bit more than just that phonics. The English language is a morphophonemic language. Sounds like a big word, don't panic. Morphophonemic is just talking about the two parts that go into making up the English language. So morpho is all about the morphemes. These are usually the elements to represent meaning. So sometimes we have a chunk of letters that represents a piece of meaning. And the phone is all about the phonemes to represent the pronunciation there. So that's all about the links to the sound. If you just give children phonemes, those sounds, they will not get the full picture of our language. So a lot of people say that English doesn't make sense when they try and sound it out. But that's a bit like saying shapes have straight lines. Use a ruler to draw shapes. Yes, you can say that shapes have straight lines. There are shapes that do have straight lines, and I can use a ruler to draw them, and that will help me. But there are certain shapes that don't have straight lines, and they would still count as a shape. So a circle, I wouldn't want to use a ruler to draw a circle very easily because it does not have those straight lines. I'd maybe want to use a compass instead, and I might use a ruler alongside it to measure the radius. In addition to the ruler, you might find a protractor or a compass useful with drawing more accurate straight shapes with straight lines as well. It's not just about this one thing that's going into it. So if I apply that one thing idea to words, letters have links to sounds, use phonics to spell words. Well, letters do have links to sounds, and that can be really helpful for spelling some words like cat, snail, light, or torch. But problems can arise when that's the only way that you use to spell words, because there are certain words where the letter sounds just don't correlate as neatly as that. For example, the word said. Even within the words that seem quite regular, though, there are choices that we need to make. Which way of representing the k phoneme do I use in cat? Which A do I use in snail? Which I in light? And so on. And then looking at the irregular one, so I've got the word said. We often talk about this being an irregular word, but it just doesn't fit with those conventional patterns of English, the way we think about it if we're looking from a phonics lens. But if I start with the base, say, pay and lay, so the present tense form of these words, and then try and change it into the past tense, I'd normally add the ed suffix. But that would look like that, said, paid, laid. Now, English orthography often tries to avoid a Y in the middle of words, so we end up changing it into an I a lot of the time. And we also don't like too many vowels in a row, so that's where they just use the D rather than the ED example of that past tense suffix. So actually the spelling of said does make quite a lot of sense when you look at it through these other lenses. It just doesn't sound quite like we'd expect it. So it's not the phonemes that are at play with that one. So over time, the pronunciation of said has changed from having that A in it to having a short E sound instead. And you can hear that still happening in words like again and against, because you can say it like that, or you could say again and against, and both of those sound okay. Now, I think looking at words through these multiple lenses is really, really important. So you've got the phonemes layer. So if I look at the word uncommonly, I've got all of these different phonemes in that word. So e, all those phonemes, which I can separate like that into the graphemes as well. I can split it into syllables, uncommonly. Or I can split it into morphemes with the base of common, add a prefix of un, and a suffix ly there. So the phonemes, the syllables, and the morphemes can have debate. So you might have put your syllable breaks in a slightly different place, or pronounce your phonemes slightly differently, or break the words up slightly differently, depending on lots of different things. Sometimes it's not as simple as having an answer. So we will explore some of that as we go through the whole series of webinars. We'll talk about that more in each of the individual ones. Now, if you're looking to learn a lot more about morphology, there's lots of text to help expand into teaching spelling through morphology. And I've pictured some that I've read here. I really love that Spelling Out by Mr. O'Donoghue. It's a bit one of the shorter ones of it there. That red one, Introducing Morphology, is quite a complex text there by Rochelle Lieber, but it's really, really interesting. I'm still finding, though, there's a lot of conflicting information from different sources on different elements of morphology, so don't be alarmed if you find that as well. Language is just not always clear cut, and like I say, we'll keep exploring that as we go through. So some of the problems we have with spelling pedagogy is the ways that we're trying to approach it. So normally it falls into one of these four categories: memorization, osmosis, testing to teach, or phonics as the only way. So memorization is all things like look, cover, write, check, mnemonics, so big elephants can always understand small elephants, writing things in the air, and multi-sensory memorization techniques, rote learning of spelling as well. Now, I'm not saying multi-sensory is bad or mnemonics is bad or anything like that, but this cannot be the sole way of teaching spelling, because it just is about memorizing units of information, and there's just too many words in our language. There's 171,000 words in common usage vocabulary. The Oxford English Dictionary's got about 500,000 entries, so you just can't memorize everything. The other idea is that spelling will just happen. So children that read a lot will be good spellers. If you practice your handwriting with your spelling, you'll just get better at spelling. Same with writing. The more you write, the more you spell, then eventually it will stick. Or if I keep doing it as a teacher and spell well, eventually the children will learn to spell as well. Yes, all of this stuff does impact the spelling for children. Obviously, we want good models. We want to expose good spelling in reading, in writing, etc. But that is not going to be enough to teach spelling, especially for all children. Some children might pick it up like this, but it will be a very few out of your class. Testing to teach as well is where you hand out a list, the children go home and practice, and then they have the test in school. So there's not actually any teaching going on in school. It will probably have a lot of those memorization techniques when the children practice at home. So a lot of people ask me about whether you should use spelling tests, and there's not a clear answer to that. But if this is what you're doing, then no, we don't want to be doing that, because we're not actually teaching the spelling, we're just assessing it over and over again. And the final problem is phonics only. So like we've just been saying, phonics is not the only thing that I need in spelling. I've got these really complex alphabetic code charts. If I just try to use my phonics knowledge, I'll be stuck because there's so many different options to use there. And that's where you end up with things like GHOTI can spell fish, because GH can represent f, like in rough, O can represent if, like in women, and TI can represent a sh, like in option. That's a load of nonsense. If we look at what an effective speller does, is they draw on the entire rich linguistic tapestry of a word to spell it correctly. So the threads of this are quite wordy: phonological knowledge, orthographic knowledge, morphological knowledge, and etymological knowledge, and the visual knowledge. So we've got the phonics, which is the letter sound links, the orthographical, which is the possible letter sequences that we can have in our language, the morphology, all those units of meaning, and the etymology, where those words have come from. All of these things are coming together, and eventually we'll get to a point where we have memorized some of these words and they are in our visual memory. So if I look at some words that would apply to, phonological, a good word would be sheep, sheep, and I use the regular grapheme for each of those phonemes there. Orthographical could be the word fluff, so I've got two f in fluff. At the beginning of the word, I only use one F, and after that short vowel at the end of the word, I use two. So it's that letter pattern knowledge that is explaining why I've got that double F at the end, but only one at the beginning. Morphological, if I look at the word unknotted, I've got a prefix and I've got a suffix on there as well as the base knot. I've also got some orthographical patterns happening there where I double that letter when I add it. So there's lots of things tied together. And etymological is all about the word origin. So the word chef comes from French, which is why we've got the CH representing the sh phoneme instead of an SH like we would normally expect in English. So if I apply these different strands to that nonsense phonics word that we were talking earlier, the GH is quite rare for spelling the phoneme, and it's only at the end of words after OU or AU. So a bit of my orthographical knowledge there about where that would appear in words. It's really, really helpful. There are etymological reasons for why we've got that G in there too. The O representing I sound is only in the word women, and there are etymological reasons for why that is there too. We might explore some of these in the etymology section. And the TI representing the sh phoneme is only as part of suffix, so it's never at the end of a word. So it would be with the ION suffix, I'd have a TI leading into it, or an IAN suffix, TI leading into it. So to tie that all together, I've got my linguistic knowledge here, the phonics, the orthography, the morphology, the etymology, which I need to process and apply to spelling a word. So it takes a little bit of time to go through this route, and it might seem slower at first. But the more times I go through that process of spelling out a word using my phonics knowledge or my orthographic knowledge, then the more times I do it, the more I will build up a visual knowledge, a visual memory of these words that I am going through that process with. But you will see from this diagram here, which we've used our Edshed version of the Oakley and Fellows diagram, this visual knowledge doesn't just come out of nowhere. It is linked to all of this linguistic knowledge. It is not just magical shortcut straight to visual memorization techniques. And a really interesting study on this was by Esposito, Herbert and Sumner from 2023. They said, of note, at present, there is a dissociation between the theories of spelling development, which highlight the importance of phonology, orthography and morphology, and what's actually going on in the classroom instructional practices, which are focusing largely on phonics and memorization approaches. So one of their things was to do a survey of teachers and the strategies used to teach spelling, and the top one was look, say, cover, write, check, which is a memorization technique. We've got mnemonics in there, which is memorization. Morphology was just over 50% of people saying they use morphology, when really we want it to be everybody using morphology for teaching spelling, and a few more memorization techniques down there as well. Okay, so hopefully I've not baffled you with too much terminology today. You will be hearing some more of it as we go through the phonics, the orthography, the morphology and the etymology webinars. So please do make sure you've registered for them, and I'll be back next week to talk more about phonics and how it can be relevant for every child. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box and I will answer them, or you can email us at support@edshed.com, which I'll just pop on the screen now for you. Okay, I can see a question in there about helping dyslexic students with spelling as well. So for me and helping children with dyslexia, it is all about tying in these different elements. So children with dyslexia will struggle a little bit with the phonology side of things because of the language mapping in the brain, but helping by using morphology and using some orthographic skills will really support that. So if you tune into the next couple of weeks, hopefully that will give you some more strategies for that too. Just trying to check if there's any more questions in there. Okay, thank you very much for joining us, everyone.